We mentioned yesterday that everybody agrees that when Hashem had said Lech Lecho, Me'artzcho Me'laretcho, that he should leave his homeland, his birthplace, and his family, this is definitely one of the 10 tests. So the question we asked was, if Avram himself had putting it mildly, a contentious relationship with his father, where his father had given over to be killed because what he had done to the idols, and his countrymen wanted to kill him, and he was a fugitive in hiding in a cave for many years. He was a pariah, and now Hashem says, leave this forsaken location, go to the land that I will show you, and when you go, it's for your benefit. La noscho l'tevos, for your benefit and for your goodness, because here you're not going to have children, there you will have children. Here you have no fame, and there you will have renown. I mean, what's the test? Why is it so difficult to leave? He should flee from where he's at. Till now, he doesn't know where. Maybe he's going from the frying pan into the fire. But now that Hashem says, l'tevos la noscho, what's the test? Not only that, Avram Avinu, this is post-Orkazdim. He's been in the kiln, he's come out of the kiln. And the only reason why he came out of the kiln miraculously was Hashem took him out of the kiln. So if the one who took him out of the kiln tells him, go to the land I will show you, and it will be for your benefit and for your good, and you're going to have all that I'm telling you, why is this a challenge? But yet, everybody agrees. It's either the second test or it's the first test. What is the test? That's the question we asked. So we'd said in the past that how did Avram Avinu come upon Hashem? So the simple understanding is, the way most people understand, he found God through his quest for truth, through his analysis of what he saw regarding existence. The only answer is there's one creator, and it's not divided among multiple powers. There's a monotheistic being which wills this existence. That's the way most people understand it. But if you take a look at the Midrash, that's not their understanding. That's not the reality of what happened. We asked another question. Was Avram the most intelligent, the most brilliant person in his generation, or all the generations? He found God, nobody else was able to find God. And therefore they attributed to what? To the various deities, which is paganism. So the Midrash says this. The Midrash explains it. Avram Avinu was a very bright man. Brilliant. He wasn't necessarily the most brilliant. And he entered into many dialogues, theological discussions, and he had questions. And he wasn't satisfied with the answers. Now, very often, as we say, a person has a question, he gets an answer. And there's an expression, I could live with that answer. Avram Avinu didn't want to live with an answer. Avram Avinu wanted the answer. Why did he want the answer? Because Avram Avinu wanted to understand who endowed him with all this opportunity, his physical existence, his function, and existence that he functions within this existence which borders on the infinite. Who is his benefactor? Because whoever his benefactor is, he wants to pay a debt of gratitude and invest his life to serve this benefactor. Because he's not going to put his ability anywhere but whoever that benefactor is, to express this debt of gratitude. So therefore, the answers he received, which they were answers, for him were not satisfactory, because he did not want an answer that he could live with. He wanted an answer which was the answer. Who is the benefactor? So the Midrash explains with an allegory. This person comes and he sees this enormous citadel. And the citadel has endless number of rooms, and every room is illuminated. That means it's functional. And he calls out, Mi balabira. Who's the master of the citadel? And he keeps calling out. and nobody answers. And finally, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Ani balabira. I am the master of this existence. Because Avram Avinu wasn't willing to compromise his standard of truth, his quest for truth. Therefore, he merited that the source of all truth openly revealed himself to him and said, Ani balabira. I am the master of this citadel. I'm the master of this existence. That's how Avram came upon God. Not that he figured it out. Because you understand, I always tell over the story. You know, I used to meet with this person every other week for a number of years, the professed atheist. And he had very good questions. He was a very tenacious, very forceful type of personality, very smart. And because of his questions became his answers. If it must be, there is no God. So I said to him, because you don't have answers, that doesn't mean the answer is that your question is legitimate and that confirms there's no God. He says, but I asked the question to so many people. Doesn't mean anything. Just because they didn't have the answer doesn't confirm your position is correct. I said, I can give you 6 answers to every one of your questions. That's what I said to him. And I nearly got him over the hump, but it was always that issue. Couldn't get over the hump. So Avram looks at this enormous world, even to consider he came upon the truth himself. There's a word from the Maral where David Melch says, Mi yamal gvuras Hashem yashveh kol tiloso. Who could utter the power of God to be able to express all his praise? So the Gemara tells us in Brachos that there was an Amora. He began to sing God's praises. And he said, Hakel, Hagodl, Hagiba, Hanora, Izus, kept going. Then he stopped. So his Rebbe says to him, he says, if you started, you have no right to stop. Why? Because if you stop, that means whatever else could be said, God doesn't possess those qualities, and that's why it stopped. So once you start, you can't stop. So the famous word from the Dubna Magid, who is the expert in allegory, he says, and he explained everything with a moshel. He says, what is it analogous to? This interaction between this Rebbe and the Talmud. He says there was this king, he was just coronated, and all the ministers from all over the world came with gifts and they sang his praises. The king is handsome, the king is powerful, the king is insightful, the king is a strategist. Each one gave his praise. And then this person comes in and he says, the king has a crooked nose. That's what he says. So the king hears this, and this is in the presence of all the ministers from all over the world. He says, man, for that level of disgrace, he deserves to be taken out and killed. But he says, I want to ask you a question before he executed. How foolish could you be to make such an irresponsible statement publicly that you know it's going to cost your life? Because you don't understand your honor, your master, your highness. All the other people, my praise is greater than their praise. So he says, why? Because when they said the king is powerful, what about all the other attributes and qualities? Maybe yes, maybe no. When I said the king has a crooked nose, that means every conceivable attribute and quality you possess. This is your only shortcoming, that you have a crooked nose. Therefore, my praise is greater than all their praise. This is the Dubna Makid. Once you say something, does mean he's exceptional. But there are many levels of being exceptional. And maybe he doesn't possess that. So once you start praising Hashem, you're not permitted to stop. Because if you stop, that means he may not possess those qualities and those attributes. That's the Dubna Magid. See, the Maral explains, Miyamal Gurus Hashem, even when you see the power of God, do you truly understand what that power is? And even if you do understand it, when we see the world, we see the world at a very limited level. Even you see it in depth, but the world is so expansive. Do we know what's going on in the Amazon jungle? Do we know what exists subterranean? Do we know what's under the ocean? We don't. There are many things we don't know. See, even if we understand what we see, but we understand only an infinitesimal part of existence, whatever we understand, even we understand that piece, but there's so much more to understand. So through analysis, a person that makes an analysis, what's an appropriate analysis? If you see the full picture, you make an analysis. But if you see just an infinitesimal part of the picture, how could you make an analysis? It's not possible. So this is what David says. This is the Maral of Prague. Mi amal gurus Hashem. Who could utter the power of God? Even when we see his power, we don't understand that. Even we do understand it, Yashveh Kolti Lasso. Could you express all his praise? We don't see everything. So you can't understand what you don't see. So if Avram Avinu came upon God through his analysis, how's it possible? There's so much more he wasn't aware of, so maybe his conclusion wasn't correct. But according to the Midrash, the way we understand, that it's not he came upon God. It's not he figured it out. But because he wasn't willing to compromise his standard of truth and to accept anything but the truth, therefore the source of all truth came to him and says, Ani Balabira, I am the master of the citadel. So the reason why Avram Avinu wasn't willing to accept an answer and he wasn't able to live with the answer, because Avram Avinu's depth and breadth of being a debtor to his benefactor was unending, and he wasn't going to pay that debt and his homage to anybody but whoever that is. That was his Hakor Satov. What we call is that he had to express his appreciation and his beholdeness to whoever the source of that endowment was. Now, we speak about people say, their objectivity. Could a person be totally objective on an absolute level? Ernie, what do you say? Is it possible? It's not possible. The only one who could be objective on an absolute level is only Hashem. In our lives, if there's any level of influence which we have in our lives, automatically everything is attributed to whatever those influences are. So the only one who is not influenced is God himself, because he's the one who wills, he's not affected, he's not impacted. We, who our parents were, our upbringing, our peers, our experience in life, our education, whatever we experience in life, that's part of our makeup. Avram Avinu, at the end of the day, is a giant, a spiritual giant. His upbringing. Even when you make a mistake, what's the value of a mistake? If you learn from a mistake, even the mistake has great value. So when you're dealing with people and they don't agree with you, and they have reasons why they don't agree, even if they're wrong, you learn from them. That's part of your development. So Avram Avinu, the Mishnah tells us in Bava Metzia, why does a person have to return the lost article of his father before a stranger? Because your father, you wouldn't live, you wouldn't exist unless your father fathered you. Therefore, first priority is to your father. To your Rebbe, if your father and your spiritual father, who through him you have a share in the world to come, his returning his lost article takes precedence over your father. Because we're all beneficiaries. Now, Avram Avinu understood the only reason why they wanted to kill him and they disagreed with him because they didn't understand. But he believed that he had the ability that with time, he'd be able to convince them and explain to them why the basis of that position is totally wrong. And ultimately, they'd also become monotheists. So what is the greatest favor he could do to his family, to his countrymen, and to the members of his community? To bring him to truth. Because he himself is beholding to every one of these segments of his life. Because they contributed to who he is. So his level of Hakor Satov was that level. It's true they wanted to kill him. His father gave him over to be killed. But why? Because his father didn't understand who he was. I always give the example. If you borrow $1 million from someone, and that person goes and betrays you, regarding another area, are you still a debtor to that person? As much as that person did the wrong thing, you're still a debtor. You owe the man the $1 million, you got to pay. Well, if he did that, I'm not going to pay. What does one thing have to do with another? You're still indebted. You're still a debtor. You have to pay that debt. Avram understood. He's indebted to every one of the segments of his life, his homeland, his countrymen, his parents, his family. All of a sudden, Kodesh Baruch Hu comes to him and says to him, Lech lecha mi'artzcha v'lartcha beis avicha, el oretz asher erecha. God says, pick yourself up and leave. You're wasting your time. And the Medrash says, it's like flight shel tzlucha shel flighton. You have a flask of the most fragrant perfume. It's in a cemetery. The dead can't benefit from that fragrance. So you say, take that flask of perfume, put it among the living. You put it among the living, they'll benefit. Hashem says, as much as you want to change these people, at this point, it's like trying to awaken the dead. It's not going to work. Totally ineffective, regardless of what you believe. You want to express your appreciation, your debt of gratitude to try to help these people. It's helpless. It's futile. You're not doing anything. That's lech lecha. Because of the dimension of level of indebtedness that he has and his capacity, Hashem says, leave. The Medrash says, the moment he says leave, he picked himself up and left. What should he be said? You know what he should have said? If he wasn't at this level, this was the test. Hashem, give me one last chance. Let me try one more time. Maybe it'll work. When Hashem says it's beating a dead horse, the moment God says it's hopeless, picked himself up and left. If he would have said, give me one last chance, you know what it would have been? He would have failed the test. That means he wasn't negated to Hashem's assessment of what the reality is. He accepted it as absolute fact. He left. And immediately, Avram Avinu had quite a bit of preparation needed to leave. No. Whatever he had to leave behind, he left behind. He picked himself and left immediately because Hashem says, Lech lecha. It's like Vayashkem Avram Baboker. Immediately, he rose early. He's going to slaughter his son. But we learn from there, the degree of zeal and alacrity one has to have. You rise early to the mitzvah, regardless how difficult the mitzvah is. Doesn't make a difference. Because that's the degree that he esteemed it and valued the word of Hashem. That's the test of Lech lecha. Because Hashem, who took him out of the kiln, even though that, we have a right to ask. No. He was negated to Hashem to such a point. If Hashem says it's hopeless, regardless what I believe is incorrect, and I leave. That's the test of Lech Mi'artzecha. Over here, the Balaturim, if you have across those Chumash, Lech Lecha. What's Lech Lecha? Numerically, Lech is 50. Lamed is 30, Chav is 20, Lech Lecha is 100. Lech Lecha, he says, here you will not have a child, there you will have a child. At what age did Avram have Yitzhak? He was 100 years old. Lech Lecha, at what age will this happen, come to fruition? What you will be Lech Lecha, they will be 100 years old. That's the illusion of Lech Lecha. Okay. What's going to be? What's the benefit and the good for you? I will make you into a great nation. And you'll be blessed. And you'll have renown. And you'll be blessed. I mean, if I can make you a great nation, and it says, and I'll bless you, and I will give you great renown. What's the bracha? And you will be a blessing. So Rashi. When one travels, it has a negative effect on a person. The person, it interferes and compromises his ability to procreate. There's a cost factor. When you move, the goodwill you had in the other community you no longer have, also the cost of traveling. Umentis has shame. And you didn't, when you come to a new location, whatever level of relationship you have to start over again. Okay? What's Vabarechocho? The Momo. Right? We say the first bracha of Birchas Kohanim. Yivorach Hashem Yishmerecha. What's Yivorecha? Means monetary. He should give you a monetary endowment, and he should watch over it. That's the first bracha of Birchas Kohanim. Avarecho is monetary. Bereshis Rabo. V'agad l'shmecho. This is interesting. I will, literally means I will give you great renown. Your name will expand. Avram, when he left, was Avram. He became Avraham. Right? Your name will no longer be, your name will become enlarged. Shimcha Avram, Avram. Until now you were Avram, then you will become Avraham. Avram ha'oleh Ramach keneged Eivor Shalodom. Numerically, Avram is Ramach 248, which means you will be a person who has total control over your physicality. As later we find after the Milah, Avram had the name changed when he was circumcised. And over there, Rashi cites Chazal that Avram is Ramach. They were, until he was circumcised, there was a certain part of his body he did not have control over. His eyes, his ears, and his male organ. Meaning, we would discuss that the orla, the foreskin on the male organ, represents the evil of the Eitz Hadas. So all his passions and his drives for physicality, which is the antithesis or contrary to spirituality, spiritual growth, that will allow you to take full control over your physicality. You'll have that control. That's agad lo shmecha. We explained, Avram was told you can have renown. What's the value of renown? The simple understanding. Rather than say the hey, the answer. Add it to your name. You know, Avram was the second most humble person ever lived. He is not interested in renown. It's okay. You know, I don't need my name in blaring lights. I don't need that. The answer is Avram had to have that attractiveness. Because he had to be influential. He had to influence the world. So Agad L'Shmech, the renown was key to his success, to be effective in his area of what? Of outreach. That he should be able to get through to people. People should want to have a relationship with him. So he has that special charisma. That's Agad L'Shmech. That your name, you'll have full control over your body. If the whole purpose of his existence was only serving Hashem, so the more he was able to be in a position, a more secure position, to serve Hashem, that's the greatest bracha in his life. That is the greatest bracha. And I once mentioned the name of the Dubna Magid, the comment between the parts, Bris Bein Absorim, Avram Avinu was told, your children will be enslaved for so many years, and then they will have great wealth. So what was the great wealth? We were told before we left Egypt to borrow the personal effects of the Egyptians, the gold and silver vessels, and therefore we left with great wealth. However, the Medrash says the great wealth is what? Is Kabbalah Satorah. The ultimate rechush, great wealth that we received the Torah at Sinai. So the question is, here the Pasuk says explicitly, what was the great wealth? Dabrid no bosneon. Please ask, tell the people they must ask, borrow from their neighbors, because I have to fulfill my word to Osat Tzaddik, because I told them, because then they're going to have great wealth. Therefore, you must borrow the gold and silver. And here the Medrash says the Rechush Godel is Kabbalah Satorah. So how do we reconcile it? Remember, I mentioned this in the past. So the Dubna Magid, again, explains it with a mashal, with an allegory. Alan, you remember the Dubna Magid? So Dubna Magid explains it by saying there was this person His son needed a summer job. And he had a friend who had a farm. And his friend said he'll hire this teenage boy. But the boy had to work for 3 months from dawn to dusk, manual labor. After the summer is over, the employer, the farmer, takes a piece of paper and writes him an IOU, a very large amount of money for the 3 months of work. That was his payment. The boy's illiterate. Here the boy thinks, here I worked from dawn to dusk every day, back-breaking labor. At the end of the day, he gives me a piece of paper with some scribbling on it. So he comes home, he shows it to his father, and his father sees that the kid is depressed, is unhappy. And the father looks at the paper and he realizes what the son doesn't understand, the value of that paper. So he calls up his friend and he says, his friend, do me a favor. Take a few silver coins that shine and jingle, put them in a little bag, give it to my son, who'll be the happiest kid in the world. And that's what he does. He's ecstatic. He has the shiny coins. It's only because he was illiterate, he didn't understand the value of that piece of paper. So the Dubn Magna says, when we left Egypt, what was our capacity to understand spirituality? Do we have an appreciation for what Torah was? What it means to be taken as the Goy Kodosh and the Mamlech Kohanim? Do we have a capacity to write that? We're at the lowest level, spiritually speaking. So what, at that moment, what touched it, what resonated with us? Gold and silver. 50 days later, we're standing at Sinai. After seeing Kriyas Yam Suf, we had a different understanding of what value was. Now you're ready for the big time. Now's the big moment. Now you're going to understand what the Rechush Gadol is. And you'll understand what you were given. It has no value unto itself. That's only to facilitate what you'll be given now. That's the Dubna Magid. So what is the ultimate? Avarechuchem. You're going to be circumcised and your name is going to be Avraham, is Rishus Ramach. Today, you don't have full control over yourself. Of course, you still have that representation of the Eitz Hadas. But someday you can be Avram, you'll have full control. That's the ultimate bracha. Now I could serve Hashem selflessly without impediments. Similar to us reaching a level of what the Rechush Gadol was after we left Egypt, which is 50 days later. What does it mean he died? Avram, when he was told to leave Ur Kasdim, Avram Avinu achieved a certain dimension of spirituality, which was unrelated to his father. Normally, there's a medrash that says HaKadosh Baruch Hu is able to take or min hachoshech. He can extract light from darkness. How's it possible? Well, Hashem could do things which no one else could do. That's ex nihilo. The world was nothing, and from nothing came something, because he willed it should be. Avram was or min hachoshech. It says, what are examples of or min hachoshech? Avram terach. That Avram was able to descend from terach was like extracting light from darkness. All his qualities, his accolades and his attributes were unrelated to his father. When he achieved this level of development of spirituality, there was no connection between Avram and his father any longer. So the only reason why you have an obligation of kibbud of is because whatever you possess, it's somehow related to what your antecedent was. But since Avram was achieved the level of development, which was unrelated, it was an endowment from Hashem, therefore, for all intents and purposes, he was absolved from kibbud of, from honoring his father, because what he was, he became like another being. That's the moral of Prague. So for all intents and purposes, the past chapter is a closed chapter. It's no longer part of Avram's what? Avram's pedigree. Terach is not the pedigree of Avram. Avram is the beginning of a new pedigree, which is himself, which is the equivalent of extracting light from darkness. That's how the Maharal explains this midrash. A non-Jew's neshama and a Jew's neshama, it's a different level, different dimension. So how do you take a non-Jewish soul and somehow convert it into a Jewish soul, which has a total different capacity? And now that neshama needs Zaymitz's Bnei Noach, 7 Noahide laws are sufficient to maintain that soul. You become a Jew, you need Ramach, 248 positive commandments, 365 negative commandments. Because the needs to nourish, to sustain the neshama, they need other levels of infusion of spirituality. So how does this limited soul, if you have a cup that has a capacity to hold 1 ounce, how do you put in 1,000 gallons in an ounce cup? It doesn't have the capacity. So how does this infinitesimal neshama, even less than that, compared to what a Jewish neshama is, how does it become the equivalent of the Jewish soul? So the Ramchal explains it this way, that conversion works if you have a branch of another species of tree and you graft it onto a tree and you graft it on properly. Over time, what happens? What fruit begins growing on that branch? The ecology of the branch becomes the same ecology as the tree. We learned this in Kedushin. Kal Gerim is not Kal. Lo Yovo Mamza B'Kal Hashem. A Mamza is not permitted to marry an original Jew, but a convert can. Why? Because a Ger he doesn't have his independent identity. He's not Kahal. So how did he become what he became? He was grafted onto the Jewish people. Hashem says, if you follow this procedure, his neshama becomes part of the spiritual ecology of the Jewish people. As a result of that, his neshama becomes a different entity. Like the tree begins producing fruit, the fruit of the tree that it's grafted onto. That's the concept of Gerus. That's why the Gerus has no relevance to his past. Avram was the beginning. He wasn't grafted onto anything. He was the tree itself. It's because he became what he became, he has no relevance to his past. Let's say a bracha, so Rashi, ha-brachos nesuras b'yodecha. Until now, I was the one to give brachas. Now, that ability to give brachas is your domain. Arach shev hoyu biyodi, birachti lo odom menoach. I blessed Adam and Noach. Now it's your choice to bless whoever you choose. This is the famous Rashi. It's Chazal. We say in Shmones Elokei Avram. V'avarecho zeshomrim Elokei Yitzchok. V'agad l'shmecho. Your name you'll have this ultimate level of greatness, the Shom Elokei Yaakov. Now, before we go further, of the patriarchs, who was the greatest of all the 3 patriarchs of the Avos HaKadoshim? Was Yaakov. Yaakov, in the words of Chazal, is referred to as Bechir Sheba'avos. He was the chosen among the 3 patriarchs. Why? Because since he had 2 generations before himself, Avram and his father, he was a composite of both of them. So he was what? As a result of his antecedents, he was able to advance himself further than both Avram and Yitzchok. He's the Bechir Sheba'avos. So what's V'gadlo Shmecho? The ultimate renown is Yaakov. He's the one who fathered the 12 tribes. The Shift Dekah are his children. The Gemara says, why did Avram have a Yishmael? Because the Zuama, the impurity of the Eitz Hadas, was still associated with him. That was the expression of that impurity. Why did Yitzchak have an Esav? Because the Zuama, the impurity was still with him. It expressed itself in Esav. Yaakov, it was Mitosa Shlema. All his children were tzaddikim. Yaakov was able to expunge that impurity, whatever was left, he was pure. As a result of that, the fruit that he produced, the souls that he produced, were all tzaddikim. Therefore, that's Agad L'Shmecha. Who's the ultimate? The ultimate is Yaakov. And proof of that fact, he fathered Yud Bei Shvatim. And this is the whole story with when he fell asleep on the Temple Mount. Took the 12 stones and then they were fused into 1 stone. That was a confirmation that he will father the Jewish people, that the 12 became 1. And therefore it says, V'yisa Raglo. When he left, he was walking on air for that reason. Okay? This Vagad Shmecha. That's the greatness. You will have the greatest level of renown. Okay? Maybe the conclusion of the bracha, you should say, Mogen Avram Yitzchak Yaakov. We should conclude all three patriarchs. Talmud Loma v'yei bracha. You will conclude the bracha with you, not with them. Now, how do we understand this? You would think if Yaakov is Bechir Sheba'avos, is the most special of the patriarchs, how should the bracha conclude? Definitely, Yaakov should be included. Should be included. Or maybe say Yitzchak also should be included. Why? Because if not for the bracha that Yitzchak had given to Yaakov, we wouldn't survive. Right? So if that's the case, Yitzchak should be included. If Esav would have received the bracha, the material bracha, we say in Kemach in Torah. It's only because the bracha of Yitzchak, that's the reason why we could exist. So maybe we should mention Yitzchak also. Each one of them contributed something very significant. So we should conclude Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. The bracha, no, we conclude with you. Because if Avram himself wouldn't have come upon Hashem, the others wouldn't have been able to advance themselves. Therefore, you're the one. That's Vayei Bracha. We conclude Mogen Avram. So I'd said it's not so simple. Why does Hashem have to see this? Now, in last week's parsha, the Torah alludes that Avram was thrown into the kiln. That's the Rekazdim. So the Medrash quotes a posuk that the reason why Avram was saved from the kiln is because he was redeemed by Yaakov. You hear this? He was redeemed by Yaakov. That's what he was saved from the kiln. Because when he was thrown into the kiln, the Malachim came and said, why are you saving him? Let him perish in the fire, because ultimately his children, he's going to have descendants that are Rishoyim. So Hashem answered, but he's going to have a grandson by the name of Yaakov. He'll be able to deflect, and that's the Kol Yaakov. So who is the Poder? Who redeemed Avram? Yaakov. So why did he come out of Ur Kasdim? Only because ultimately he was going to have a grandchild, Yaakov. So if that's the case, we definitely should mention Yaakov. Because the only reason why there's an Avram and there's a Yitzchak, because there's going to be a Yaakov. So if that's the case, although he may have introduced monotheism, but you definitely should mention Yaakov, because the only reason why he exists is only because of Yaakov. So on that, the Torah says it doesn't make a difference. It's true. But if Avram wouldn't have planted that original seed and introduced the world to monotheism, there wouldn't have been a Yitzchak, wouldn't be. It's true. Ultimately, there was a Yaakov, but that was in the schus of Avram. So there had to be a Yaakov. But if there would have been an Avram, there would have been an Yaakov. Therefore, as a result of that, each will place off the other one. Therefore, the conclusion of the bracha is Mogen Avram, and the other two, Yitzchak and Yaakov, are not mentioned in the conclusion of the bracha. That's how we explained it.